Here is an opportunity and an invitation for you to refocus your energies and recommit to the inner path of the sage, that higher spiritual evolution that we so often sidestep or postpone. There is a brief window right now, the narrow gate, where universal forces are aligned with you to make a bold breakthrough.
What sort of insights also around the DNA with this vision of the chariot? How have you tied that together, of how the DNA plays a role in all of this?
That mutation that's currently already hybridizing through human DNA and popping up in different places in a hybrid form will be fully ready. So the first versions, complete versions of that change, of that transformational change, will start appearing in the human genome, right? And when and where is a mystery. There's a new subspecies, or more than a subspecies, there's a new human that starts to appear. And the energy and the auric signature of such a being will be very different. So welcome everyone. Emilio and I have been warming up, and I've been telling him about a big book I've been writing for about 7 years, which is a book based on the gene keys, but based also on the lines of the gene keys. And if you happen to know anything about the Chinese I Ching, it would be a gene keys I Ching. So it is based on it is a multi-dimensional book, that almost a technology that you can use in lots of different ways. And one of the ways you can use it is as a ceremonial oracle. And so there are different ways you can cast. In the tradition of the I Ching, you would cast coins or yarrow stalks for your divination, and then the ancients would follow the divination of the different lines that came up, and there are 384 lines, and there are combinations of them that can also come up. So it lends itself to a very deep contemplation of reality and life. And so I, through online in a way, I went to the quantum field just as we were talking and asked for 2 lines, or I asked for any combination. Anyway, I received 2 lines, and these have not been, none of these lines have been read publicly, virtually, because the book is not published yet. So this is the first time that people will be hearing them, and these are maybe setting an energy for this call. And there's 2 of them that came up most powerfully. And the first one is a word. It's called. They have little keys. And they have a little sutra, which is a 4-line, very condensed poem, or like a Zen koan, like a mysterious, contemplative poem. And so what we received is Gene Key 29. 29 is about true, deep commitment to the path. It's about saying yes to the path, whatever the path is delivering. So this is called confirmation. So I'm going to read you just a little bit of it to set the tone for this call. Difficult decisions that make the path clearer and lead to healing for all involved. So I'm hoping that these 2 lines will inspire things that may be going on in your life right now. Difficult decisions that make the path clearer and lead to healing for all involved. And the sutra is called The Power of Yes. Very short. Saying no with love is another way of saying yes. Saying no with love is another way of saying yes. The contemplation. As one of the portals of initiation, confirmation is a powerful rite inspired by Christian tradition, but also containing layered esoteric meaning that predates Christianity. As the sutra here testifies, Everything that is done with decisive clarity has a hidden yes within it. This energy of yes is the impulse of the divine working out its magic in the world of form. In the long journey of the soul through its successive incarnations, we come to moments of confirmation in which our commitment to the higher path is tested. How deep does our yes truly go? Are we willing to surrender and commit even more deeply to the path of love? This line also teaches us discipline, to say no to paths that distract us away from our true destiny. And this sometimes means disappointing others while empowering ourselves. Thus, there is much learning in this line. That's the first line. So
let it marinate.
Boundaries in that one. And the second one is the line 4 of the same hexagram, 29, line 4 came up. These are the two that came up out of all the 384. Sometimes one comes up, sometimes many. This is the line called intensity. And these two will probably in your contemplation sit together. Intensity, burning commitment that eventually turns inwards. Burning commitment that eventually turns inwards. The sutra is called the narrow gate. To the youth, all is burgeoning. To the aged, all is dwindling. Pushing aside both pretenders, the sage steps fully into the path of light. To the youth, all is burgeoning. To the aged, all is dwindling. Pushing aside both pretenders, the sage steps fully into the path of light. And the contemplation, bringing together a perfect cocktail of the fourth line with gene key 29. Here is a potent line indeed. This energy could be used externally to manifest anything one wishes on the material plane. Anything one wishes. Or internally, as a razor-like awareness to steer one towards a state of self-illumination. A fusion of Buddhist and Christian mystical symbolism, the middle way of the Buddha and the narrow gate of the Gospels, this sutra is also one of few that directly mentions the sage. This is a direct challenge to us to make a deeper commitment to our own evolution, regardless of what stage our life is at. This is an auspicious line that asks us to examine how we are using our precious energy and our time in this life. And I'm going to read just this one. I'm going to read the oracle, which is just a few lines, since we threw it as an oracle. Here is an opportunity and an invitation for you to refocus your energies and recommit to the inner path of the sage, that higher spiritual evolution that we so often sidestep or postpone. There is a brief window right now, the narrow gate, where universal forces are aligned with you to make a bold breakthrough. Such an opportunity does not come around often, so you may wish to temporarily pause all external commitments and take advantage of the spiritual conditions around you right now. So anyway, nice, the very clear energies in those two to set us on the trajectory of our call.
Precision. And with that said, Richard Rudd, welcome back on Just Tap In. It's always an honor and a pleasure to have you with me, and weave together with you is one of the greatest pleasures that I've had the chance to be a part of. And I wanted to ask you there, as we drew that hexagram, confirmation, difficult decisions that lead to healing. What is the most difficult decision that you feel that the collective of humanity is facing right now that will bring us toward deeper layers of healing in the years to come?
That's such a great question, Emilio. I love great questions, and I love people who ask great questions like that. Let's get into that together. I think the very difficult decision is, there are many, but it does come back to this decision about, love. Are we going to commit or recommit to our love of the planet, our love of each other, our love, it comes back to that over and over and over again in evolutionary terms. Every species has to deal with that in some way. Even like higher dimensional species, every cycle and epoch and, has to deal with that same question. And so that's why that line talks about, you can do anything with the external energy. Like we've been given great gifts, right? Especially now with our technologies, you've been given enormous gifts for manifestation. And yet eventually that same energy has to turn within. Because if it goes on going out, eventually it will drain all the resources from its environment because of its externalization. And so the decision is like when we turn inwards, and when we employ our self-inquiry and our deep contemplation, and we really look at our own behavior, and we learn, and we realize we've made mistakes, and we realize that nothing that we do out here is actually really going to save us, from ourselves, because the only place we are saved is deep in our heart. So until we mine the love that's inside us, and until we move through our own trauma, personal and collective, we are never going to get to that love, not the real store of that love. We're going to just be messing around on the periphery of life. And we're probably, the great compassion, I think, of the universe is that we're allowed to fail. We're allowed to make that mistake as many times as we want. And even if we sort of destroy the planet, and, the planet is likely to survive, and then a new form of life will reemerge, of consciousness will reemerge somewhere else. So this thing about saying yes to life, even a no, even a bad decision eventually is a yes, is seen as a yes. So nothing that life does is wrong, even through us. So nothing that we do with life moving through us is inherently wrong, even though it can lead to pain and suffering and horror and, terrible things. It's still life itself choosing that through us. And that doesn't get us off the hook at all. But at the very, very deep level of pure consciousness, life has its own trajectory and its own reason for doing everything. So deeply embedded in the gene keys and my teachings are this notion of what I call the Siddhis. The Siddhis is a Sanskrit word meaning that divine emanation that we all have, that is inside our DNA, and it's released through love. And so, I don't know, as I get older, Emilio, I just come back to that question of love over and over and over again. And I hope I don't end up becoming boring.
What's the question that you come back to?
Love.
What is it?
Are you ready to receive this love that is, that lives, that wants to manifest through you? What about you?
And you've tasted it before, for sure, right? You've
Yeah.
tasted that love before.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I taste it often. Yeah. It's that when you go into a deep contemplative journey in your life, sooner or later you come to that love. You just realize that's what makes us tick. That is the pure soul of our being. And it's hidden beneath layers of trauma. So there's no way to get to it except through that trauma. And the trauma, some of it's personal to us and this life, and some of it is more ancient, and it's collective, and it's not personal to us, and it's carried through our ancestry, in our ancestral DNA. And so that takes a lot of courage to dig into that stuff. And we call it the shadow, Gene Keys, the shadows, the 64 shadows that contain the 64 gifts, that contain the 64 siddhis, the divine emanations. So they're all like nested inside each other. So our way to awakening or enlightenment or the self-realization that we're all dreaming of is actually through the shadow. It's through going towards the trauma. So it's an incredible time because more and more humans are making that decision, the courageous decision to tackle their own trauma. And that's why in the field now it's a very popular, it's a well-known phenomenon. We are expanding our awareness of how trauma operates, and in the body and in our DNA and in our brain and our brain chemistry and our addictive patterns and the ease with which we are distracted from just being here, and like all of that is part of our escape patterns, from being in the field of love. And the field of love is also a field of miracles, so all the spiritual teachers have always taught this, so it's like, that's why I'm saying, like, I just sound boring. Everyone's said this before, but for a good reason.
It's in the field. It's a transmission that you're tapping into.
Yeah.
Day 3, Bardsey Island. You take on a boat. You're going to the island where supposedly Merlin was buried. And that was when you had your experience of cosmic awareness and almost like a samadhi-like state. And you received a final vision for the future a future of humanity. And I'm not sure how in detail you would like to go into that, but I would love to just get an overview of what that vision is and how maybe through the years you've seen glimpses or tastes of that vision that you once had.
Yeah, it's another lovely question, and I love that you've kind of asked a question that's mythic as well, because as I'm exploring my own teachings, the teachings of the Gene Keys, now I'm coming to a time where I'm really looking into the mythic strands within the code book itself of consciousness, and these are what I call Codon Rings, which we might talk about. But in that experience, the third day of a 3-day kind of massive vision, more than a vision, an experience of awakening, I was taken to this little island, beautiful island, Bardsey Island, off the northwest coast of Wales. And I found now they do little trips out there, so you can still go there. You can find there's a local that will take you out on his boat and ferry you across. It's a very dangerous crossing. And it's at the end of an old pilgrimage route where the pilgrims would come all the way across Britain. And some of them would come from very far to do this trip to the Sacred Isle. And they'd stop in different churches. And often they would get to the end of the peninsula, which is a long way. And the storm would come in and they'd be stuck in this tiny little church waiting for the storms to subside. And sometimes, they wouldn't even make it. And in those days, they would cross in very flimsy boats, you can imagine, and very strong tides and wild with seabirds and beautiful. I went there last year. And again, to revisit my memory, I took my family with me, and I also said I asked for my ashes to be thrown to the winds there when I'm gone. So I sat on the little hill there, and the ancient word name for the island is Inis Enlil, an old Celtic kind of dragon word. And I sat there and I received this vision of humanity. And it was very strange and esoteric, and I've never shared the details of it, really. But one thing I will say, which I have never shared actually, is that I saw a chariot. One part of it is there was a chariot, and like an old-fashioned chariot. And it had two wheels, and one wheel was turning one way and the other wheel was turning the other way. And of course, the chariot is a symbol from the Kabbalah and a symbol from ancient Egypt and a symbol from the tarot system. And it held this vision of the future human, and standing in the chariot was the future human, you know. And I didn't realize that at the time. And because I was there, I was standing in the chariot. The future human was me, not just me personally, but me as a representative of humanity. And the future humans looked out through me, and the chariot was the wheels were the yin and the yang and the polarities of the form principles, and there was I standing in the middle, riding this chariot, and it was a very beautiful, liberating experience, and it's difficult to explain the kind of the radiance that I experienced streaming through me of all the different dimensions of this kind of multiverse that we live in. And I was the charioteer of the multiverse, you know, and this mystic chariot, we humanity, you know, we are here on Gaia right now, but our future is that we, you know, the earth, in one respect, the earth is our chariot, you know, that we ride until we are free. And then we take our higher chariot. It's like there's also in the Christian Gnostic mysteries, Elijah rode into the sun, into the sky in a golden chariot. So there's an old myth. And for me, it was like seeing the gifts that lie inside the human body, not just seeing them, but feeling them and knowing them and experiencing them. Omniscience and incredible illumination. And, you know, in those words that I mentioned, the 64 Siddhis, that every single one of those words, you know, like Gene Key 29 that we just looked at is the Siddhi of devotion, you know, so like that word represents a ray, a divine ray of pure love, you know, of pure kind of devotional love, a path, an entire evolution just through that ray. And then you could take another one of them, you know, whether it's Gene Keys, you know, 63, for example, and, you know, and that's the ray of truth with a capital T. And that's a whole path, the pathway of truth against an entire universe, passing through that Siddhi, passing through that divine emanation. And we contain all 64 of those in our DNA. And they have capacities to release us, to free our consciousness from the body. But that doesn't mean leaving the body. That means actually anchoring higher consciousness deeper into the body. And that's what the chariot represents for me. It's like the embodiment of the highest frequencies in the physical form. So instead of an escape philosophy, which is like nirvana is when we leave this plane, or we leave the body, or we leave Earth and we go on to a higher place, it's actually about bringing that higher place down here and anchoring it into the Earth and into our bodies and into our cultures and into our friendships and into our civilizations, whatever they look like in the future, and bringing those higher frequencies as a reality onto the Earth plane. So that my whole teaching then became about embodiment and the beauty of the physical form and the beauty of the world and the beauty of nature and the seasons and the animals and the creatures and food and, you know, water and just everything that comes through the senses, the divinization of the senses, you know, that they're holy, they're sacred, and that, you know, and so that for me was was part of me trying to put into words part of the vision that I saw for the future human is we are going to be devotional lovers of the earth and of each other. And we have that already within us. You know, some of us are awakening some of those faculties, and we're here, we're children, we're here to play in the universe. And one day we'll remember that when we've got over our kind of slightly self-destructive adolescent phase that we're currently moving through.
And what's interesting is a few days prior to that vision, you actually were in this cosmic awareness and you had to go attend a wedding. And you went into a town and you were looking for these like cufflinks for your suit. And someone told you about a crop circle that had just popped up in that town maybe a few days prior. And it was a strand of DNA, like a helix.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that also within that vision and other information that you've received from the field is that by 2027, there's going to be a mutation in the human species that has to do with our DNA, that those humans born after 2027 will be the future iteration of that human. And that we're going to be in this like state where we're going to have humans prior mutation, humans after mutation. What sort of insights also around the DNA with this vision of the chariot? How have you tied that together of how the DNA plays a role in all of this? Before today's transmission, I wanted to take a minute to let you in on something that could change your life. If you've been doing the inner work and still feel like you're walking this path alone, you're not the only one. Most spiritual spaces give you endless content to consume, but not a tribe to grow with. That's why we created The Deep Dive, a living spiritual ecosystem designed to help you grow in community, rhythm, and real embodiment. Right now, our members are embarking on a journey exploring a core spiritual and practical teaching through daily activations, live community gatherings guided by me and our facilitators, and also participating in sacred challenges that are designed to help you live your practice and bring it to life. You'll be surrounded by seekers and leaders who've decided that they're done doing this work in isolation. If you're ready to find your people, visit the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen right now, and I'll see you inside.
Yeah, I mean, that vision of 2027 and that time, that is rooted from Ra-Uru-Hu from Human Design. So I want to credit him here for the Human Design system, which was a system that I came up through and moved through me, and then I integrated it into something different, which became the gene keys. And so that way, that coding of that timing is deeply imprinted with the 64-fold cycles of consciousness and also it has relationship to the Yuga cycles of ancient Vedic astrology, and so that it's deeply embedded in other mystery cycles, and so that, yes, it becomes a very important kind of date as a marker. And I wouldn't say that every single human born after that time is going to be one of these children, but I would say that that mutation that's currently already hybridizing through human DNA and popping up in different places in a hybrid form will be fully ready. So the first versions, complete versions of that change, of that transformational change, will start appearing in the human genome, right? And when and where is a mystery. It's a bit like the flowers in spring, the very first flowers that pop up in spring through the snow. You never quite know where they're going to appear. They don't appear everywhere, and they don't appear everywhere at once. And it's a bit like that for us. I think that it will spread. A mutation is something that spreads through the genome if it's meant to, if it has a kind of enough cling to it, and it's successful, it will then spread and start to transform the rest of DNA, and so we'll see this shift. Yeah, exactly as you said, in our species, where there's a new subspecies, or more than a subspecies, there's a new human that starts to appear. And the energy and the auric signature of such a being will be very different. And so and then there will be those of us who are still living in the old vehicles until they've sort of declined. And I want to put this into a bigger context of multi-incarnational. If people listening to this can kind of expand their consciousness even wider to go, well, it's not just about this life. It's like, well, those are our future vehicles, right? So when you disappear from this life and you cycle back down into the next one, if your timing is good and you're locked in and your frequency is well judged, you'll land in one of those and you'll get to experience, whoa, this is a new thing. This is new equipment, and it's part of the next Yuga cycle that's coming in, because we get new equipment. But then we're also going to have still old equipment around. This is often the way, when a new invention comes in and the old people are still using the old ones, and they can go on for a long time. And the old ones also have their old programming and their old patterning. So they tend to be a little bit more, self-destructive. So it could be very interesting the next 100 years or so, when we see the phoenix rising up in the ashes of the old. So anyway, we'll put that in context. And I've totally forgotten the question you asked now. Oh, DNA. Yeah. So, I was talking to, our friend Zach Bush about this recently. And in a sort of private conversation, we were talking about DNA mutations. And he was talking about triple mutations and quadruple mutations that have started to be understood and seen. And they appear in cancer cells. And they, so in the host, they cause a lot of difficulty and pain and problems. But they've been seen for the first time, and they are popping up in different places. So not to glamorize them at this stage, because it's a process where DNA is trying to find a new way to manifest. And there's a lot of talk in the mystic circles about the 12-strand DNA and all those things. And in a way, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about, quadruple helix or triple helixes that kind of then intermesh in a new way that give rise to it's not actually 12 strands, but it's a 12-fold geometry. It's a different form of sacred geometry that's building a new kind of vehicle that has capacity for much higher harmonics. So, our other friend, Robert Edward Grant, really understands this, this principle of the human body and how it can engineer itself to receive higher ratios and higher harmonic patternings, and that includes the way the brain works. Of course it must do, right? So it includes the ability, what we would consider kind of supernormal abilities, paranormal abilities right now. And we see it already landing in the autistic community, actually, and in other places here and there. But the autistic community, especially, where, children or young people are able to interconnect their consciousness. You might have heard
from the hill.
Yeah, from the hill, exactly. And it's those that is the next iteration. So you can see that's where these mutations are kind of taking us, and yet they still, a mutation takes hundreds of years to form and integrate into a new body and a new biome, and it requires certain conditions, and it requires one of the things it requires, by the way, is heat. It requires a hotter environment. Mutation loves heat, right? So it's interesting that the planet is warming, because that actually increases the possibility of mutations in some way.
And the solar activity right now that we've seen.
Well. And it also, strangely, in systems theory, in sort of, higher physics, when a system is about to undergo a massive change, there's an increase in phenomena called strange attractors. And strange attractors are kind of unpredictable behaviors that suddenly kind of fly through the system, so you don't know what they are or when they're going to appear, but you see an increasing number of them. So the pandemic, for example, is a strange attractor. You could even say Donald Trump is a strange attractor. Patterns that they do not follow linear ways. And I'm not in any way saying they're good or bad. I'm just saying you see more of them at times of change, of intense change. And they do destabilize the system. And again, I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying, I don't have an opinion on that. I'm just saying you see them and they stir things, and then we have to integrate that. And sometimes they speed up processes of decline as well. So like AI, actually, you could even say, may speed up a process of decline. And I said that before, but in other ways, it may lead to all kinds of growth, but it may speed up climate change. and people, it uses a lot of energy, and it's going to enchant humanity so much, it already is, that we sort of get, mystified by it and forget, actually, wow, I've just used a lot of energy. I've created a lot of heat there, and the byproduct is more mutation. So yeah, it's really interesting, how how DNA, it has a life of its own, and it it's designed as an open system. So it's designed to kind of, to create mutations, and some of them lead to dead ends, and some of them are very successful and they can get passed on. And success in genetic terms, might be different from what our version of success is. It's about, I would say, it's about cooperation. A species that can interconnect and cooperate at higher and higher levels of frequency, that's a real success for DNA. And of course it wants to replicate itself like a virus, like a positive virus, because that's life moving through it. But evolution is driving us into like this new biology, which I think is going to continue to arrive. But yeah, I'm not a geneticist, so I don't understand these things at that level. But I'm a poet, and I do understand, I see the mythic. I like to look at the mythical strand and how it moves through, through the scientific as well. So I read things at a poetic level. So I'm not claiming to I don't make any claims here. I'm just sharing a story. Yeah.
Also, from a poetic lens, it's very interesting because there are many, millions of species on this one planet. And it almost seems like the evolution that a species goes through relates to the environment that planet provides for it. So is there a relationship between these evolutions that humanity is going through with the evolution that the planet herself is also going through?
Yeah, I don't think you can separate them, really. In our mind as humans, we do that. We separate ourselves from the environment, and it always sort of amazes me that we do that. We think, it's our ego, I think. But if you go into an indigenous culture, for example, who are living closely to the earth, they don't do that. They don't experience themselves as separate. They don't experience, it's that whole thing about we don't own the land owns us. We are part of the territory as well. And so we have individualized to this extent that we have, and it's been part of our evolutionary trajectory, so far. Recently I did a whole human design course with a friend of mine, which we've recorded, and it'll probably, be a year or so before it comes out. It's combining human design and gene keys, and I haven't done that for years. But we went through the whole journey of evolution through the human design lens. And one of the things that we saw was the kind of changing of this epoch into the next epoch, and how everything we've built until now, the societies, the civilizations, especially in the last 400 or 500 years, is going to shift so radically in the next 400 years that we won't recognize this planet in maybe 50 to 60 years, in maybe 100 years. When we return, when you come back in your next vehicle, whoever's listening to this, you'll be like, whoa, this place is different, and this thing is different, the suit. And evolution reboots itself in lots of different directions. And I guess what I always take as hope is that nothing is ever lost. So even if there are multiple extinctions, the DNA holds the memory of every creature it's ever created. It is a memory bank, and that's kind of its akashic record. It's a record keeper, and so it loves to create new iterations of species, and but it never forgets the ones it has created before. So it can always bring back an iteration when the environment is kind of ready for it. But it'll never be the same, because it never repeats itself entirely. But nothing's lost in a way. And, sometimes, it is a very difficult time to be alive for us, because we're watching beautiful species declining, and that's across all realms, plant, animal, mineral, it's a very sad time in a way of seeing that decline, but it's also, there's great hope, because the life force itself, the trajectory of human life and of plant life and animal life and Gaian life, it has a plan. It has its own plan. And we think, because of our modern science and the materialistic viewpoint, we kind of tend towards thinking it's all random. We've inherited that. Most of us now are kind of have rethought that and kind of come to this point of like, it's not random. There's this beautiful divine plan that's kind of underway, that's unfolding, and we are part of that plan too. This is back to your question of like, human evolution and Gaia evolution are so deeply intertwined. And I don't think that someone the other day kind of accused me of thinking that humans are like the wonderful peak of consciousness, which I don't think at all. I think we're just with the eyes and ears of Gaia, to a degree at the moment. And we are a beautiful thing. And, but the future human is on an entirely different plane. It doesn't have our trauma. The trauma has been burnt white hot from the DNA. It's just gone. And so we're, that's us in our true self, our true colors. And it's like my story of the dragonfly. You can hardly kind of picture it, because, the dragonfly in its earlier evolution is this underwater predator. And then in its final form, it's this airborne, iridescent dragon. How can you make a connection between the one that's underwater doesn't even, in its wildest dreams, couldn't figure out that other creature that's hiding inside it. So we are that. So yeah, I bring a lot of good hope, I think, into the story with the Gene Keys teachings. I hope I do anyway.
And what's interesting is you said that the Gene Keys, really your work around that is preparing the frequencies for what the collective will be experiencing. And when we talk about, you use the term burning through genetically, would that mean that the 64 collective archetype shadows of humanity will no longer be around? Or how do you see that happening when you use the word burning and going into a new frequency, maybe the gifts and the Siddhi frequencies?
Well, I think exactly. I think in, like shadow, in Gene Keys, as you know, it's like the shadow is the base field, and then the gift emerges as the flower, out of the base, and then the Siddhi is the fruit that drops from the, you know, from the flower, and from the flowering. It's and in that process, you know, we're moving now into the next epoch, which I kind of sometimes call the epoch of healing, where because some of the fruits are dropping, right, for the first time, which are these Siddhis, these superpowers. You know, in certain people, they're going to show up. This is my prophecy, right? They're going to start showing up. And as they do, they're going to start spreading into humanity, and they're going to start finding ways of healing the earth and our creatures and each other that, again, we can't quite comprehend. The amount, you know, through the field of a Siddhi. Traditionally, a Siddhi is a Sanskrit word meaning, you know, a divine magical ability that humans have, and we're warned against them by the ancient Vedic teachers, you know, masters. They say don't try and cultivate the Siddhis because it can be a trap that can lure you away from the true realization, and there's truth in that. But I'm adding another layer, which is that no, if they're there, they're not there for no reason. Nature doesn't do that. They're there for healing, you know, so we can enjoy their use to help others and to heal our trauma. So the deepest compassion, you know, someone manifesting, for example, a Siddhi of compassion, the level of the effect they have on the people in their environment through the illumination of their presence and their aura, they become that white hot love that burns the DNA of others. If you've ever been around or close to an enlightened person or a truly awakened being, you will feel that emanation coming off them. And if you sit in their presence for a while, you will feel your own DNA kind of changing. You know, and if you sit long enough, you know, if you hear these stories of people sitting with the Babas or the, you know, you go into samadhi just being in the presence. You know, your mind.
I had the experience the other day.
You did, yeah.
We had a yogi on, Yogi Raj, and it was such a transmission that it was really difficult for me to ask him questions because my mind sort of stopped thinking when I was listening to him, and just to show that personal example that these things do happen, and when we're around people of those frequencies.
Exactly. So yeah, it's about embodied, you know, the embodiment of it coming in, and then it starts to help heal the traumas of others as well. And so that will spread over time. And then we will find that the shadow frequency starts to be vaporized. You know, it starts to evaporate. And then what it does is it releases all these gifts. You know, it releases the kind of the kind of genius of humans into their true creativity. Right, and true creativity, all it wants to do is create beauty. That's it. It wants to create or foster or nurture beauty, and it also has a love of simplicity. And so we're going to see my predictions. We will, in, you know, however long it'll be as the crisis subsides, we're going to see an immense creative resurgence through humanity. Where we start to experience the beauty on the inside, and then all one wants to do is externalize it, and, you know, around one. And so it starts to come into our relationships, and it starts to come into our communities, and it starts to, you know, the genius starts to network and spread. And we, you know, and the shadow is still there because the shadow is old and ancient and stubborn. And so there's going to be an epoch of healing, which could be thousands and thousands of years, where the light seeks the shadow, you know. So that's the beauty of, like, the great light, draws the shadow towards itself. So the lighter you are, the more light, the highest the frequency you have, the more you draw the shadow. It comes like a moth to the flame. because it's your delight, it's the delight of the light to transmute the shadow. There's a strange selfishness to light, selfish selflessness, because it knows that when it takes in more shadow, it becomes more light. And so it just wants, and there's no shadow it can't handle, that it doesn't draw. So it pulls the shadow into its orbit and then transmutes it in this beautiful alchemy. And then it liberates whatever being is connected, or consciousness is connected, from that shadow. When it's transmuted, then the consciousness within that vehicle is liberated. And this is my understanding anyway. So I see a really beautiful epoch coming for humanity, and it may be some time away. I mean, I'm not like, I know everyone wants it to be in this lifetime, and I'm just like honest, I don't think it's gonna be.
Yeah.
I think
bigger picture.
I think it's a bigger, we have to have a bigger picture. And then when you have a bigger picture, it enables you to be more fully here and more real. You can go, well, I came at this time because I wanted to witness the beginning of the decline and the very first birth of something so exquisite. And I'm part of that. And so it's important that we don't get hooked into like the story of the decline at one level, and then we think, well, it's all going terrible, and we go down and down and down, and then we're no use to anyone because we get, drawn down. And it's also important that we don't get over enchanted by like, it's all going to be wonderful tomorrow, And I do hear a lot of people out there saying that. I mean, on the airwaves, like, yeah, we're going to become the future human like tomorrow. And I it's like, it doesn't work like that. It's like, you got to, my gift is patience, right? In my gene keys. Like, so I kind of really, I don't want it to happen too fast. Like I want to enjoy every moment of this change, in exquisite detail. That's why we're here. So, we're in an early form. We're very early in the transformational process, but it's here, and that's why everyone's so like lit up by it. Like, because the moment you begin to awaken, you feel it, and you're like, oh my god, it's coming. And we're part of it, yes. And I'm also open to like, I said myself, I got to be careful because the trickster, like I'm open to being surprised as well, because strange attractors can also speed things up in all kinds of mystical ways. So I may be surprised, but it's I'm one of those people that I don't over project perfection, and then I'm nicely surprised if it comes, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And because when you take the gift of patience into its Siddhi, it becomes timelessness, where essentially time no longer really matters. It's you're being so in the present that whenever it happens, it's the perfect time.
Yeah, you don't even care anymore, actually. You're like, oh, well, it's going to come, so I don't need to worry about when. I just know it's coming. So I don't know. It doesn't matter if it happens in this life or in another 100,000 years. It's like, it's coming, and I have all eternity before me. So what's the rush?
Yeah. What's beautiful also is that there's signs around us that show us this evolution of humanity. And speaking from your personal lens, I'd love to know if there's any examples that you've seen of signs of humans that you've had in your field or that you've had the opportunity to be around, that you can sort of see how the flower is sprouting, giving its fruit, and then you're influenced by it at the same time. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, this summer, I went to a festival called Groundswell, and in the UK, and it's where all the kind of awakening farmers come, right? And all over the world, there are people of the earth who are seeing through this new lens of regenerative agriculture, rewilding, this incredible, this new understanding of biosystems and biomes and, new technologies. I don't mean like hard technologies. I mean like the soft technology of the mycelium and knowing how to work with natural systems in organic kind of ways and get the most out of systems by the least interference, right? And so what I saw in those 3 days of being among all those incredible people and listening to talks and from all manner of kind of earth saviors, let's call them, I saw this like, wow, the enlightened consciousness is popping out in that community all over the world. And so that's a place where I took great kind of comfort from the fact that, those pioneers in the agricultural world, who are looking at what agriculture has been and the horror story of it with its chemicals and its phosphates and all of that and why it's gone that way because of the corporations and all of it. But now there's this incredible wisdom that's returning, and it's come back through our ancestral lines, but it's met some of our science as well. So it's bolstered by the science and the understanding, and so it's gathering momentum. I think it's a lovely word, groundswell, which is this gathering of momentum of the sharing of ancient knowledge and revelations about earth systems and food systems and how we can, simplify and readjust and give new impetus and do things in a completely new way in the time ahead. I met, for instance, I went on a walk with a group of entomologists who are insect experts. And I was like, people that go really deep into one area and it becomes their passion. It's wonderful to be around them. And you're like, wow, this person specializes in one particular type of beetle and how it adapts and responds to different environmental signals and then understands how it fits into the chain of life and its predators and its prey and that cycle, and how if you take it out, the whole thing collapses, and how you can reintroduce it in certain ways and it becomes a keystone species in its area, and how it can work through the soil and improve the soil and bring life back into the soil. And I know that this is Zach Bush as well. This is his passion, talking about these things, and it's becoming more mine as well as a man of the earth. And I think that's an area, one of many areas where we're seeing these gifts of humanity being freed from the old shadow patterns of the monopolies and the polluters and the toxin, the kind of toxicity of the shadow, and how it's manifested through the territorial control of through our corporations and our big petrochemical companies and all of that. And when it's old stories like that, we all know that story now. But I'm seeing this groundswell, and it gives massive hope to our species, I think, and it's popping up in lots of different places.
It is, and I've also experienced that as well. Different communities that are being formed based on completely different values and principles. And I wanted to ask you, what would it mean for humanity to be a keystone species for the Earth?
Yeah, I think if we realize what a keystone species is and how we could be one, there's an argument over whether we are or not, actually. And it's interesting. Like, in a way, I know my intuition is that we may be, we might be something different. We might be like not the artist, but the easel upon which the artist paints. So we may not need to be a keystone species, because when we learn the art of non-interference, then that is us doing what we're here to do best, because then all the other species that are Keystone can do their job and hold up the food chain and maintain the harmonic balance, between everything. And then we are a bit more like the wizards. We become, we're not doing anything. It's our not doing that is actually allowing perfect harmony to occur. So that then we return to this ancient kind of wisdom of, choiceless awareness and not needing to do so much. And that's what I saw through this human design journey that I took with this friend of mine, that the next iteration of humanity, we're going to do less, actually, because we're going to learn how to be. We are human beings, right? We've forgotten how to be. And so we're when we find the Siddhis inside us, we become more internalized beings, actually. It's not that we don't attend to things outside, but we become much more at peace inside ourselves, and we're fulfilled through the balance of the elements in our own system, because we start to move into bliss. And when you start to move into bliss, you don't really want to go very far. And you don't, because it's like, oh, wow, well, there's not really much point in doing much if I'm in bliss. And of course you will, because part of that bliss is, as I said earlier, is to recreate it on the outside, and to create beauty. But I think that's an interesting question about the Keystone species, and it's just my hunch that we may not need to be one.
It's so interesting you brought up the doing less, because we're in a society, especially in the West, where so much is being produced in the world that if we want to enter that system, then we need to be able to catch up with all of the producing and consumption that is going on in that cycle, not allowing us to just take a step back and say, what if we just do this one thing this week or this one thing this month? And I mean, I would love that, but also entering this world as a creator where they tell you that if you're not publishing a posting every single day, 3 times a day, then the algorithm is not going to pick it up. And then all these other things happen. Yeah. So, I mean, I personally would love to see a world where we can just enjoy like that one transmission for, and ponder upon it for however many weeks it is, instead of just like the next thing. Yeah. So it's very interesting. Also coming from a podcaster saying this, that publishes an episode every few days. Yeah, it's very, very interesting.
And I was telling you earlier about me writing my Sage book, The Sage, and how it's taken me 7 years because I would only write 1 paragraph a day, and that discipline of going at that speed and living in a field of contemplation, and it's now kind of almost finished, that book. The irony is not lost on me that I could ask AI to do that now and it would create it in a matter of minutes. Yeah. Right. And so probably someone's going to do that. It's like, but then I've had an amazing 7 years. And I've opened up to deeper layers of the field of love and truth and wisdom because that's been my practice. And that's not something AI can give you. So, because it's not about the result.
Yeah.
It's about the process, the creative process. Yeah. So I kind of love that.
There's also an inherent exponential growth that you go through when you're doing one thing over a period of time. And I've seen it personally where I've been doing this show for 5 years, and it wasn't only until last year where I started to see an exponential curve in the impact and the growth of myself with these conversations. And I can imagine that, if we're inserting a prompt, write this book for me, there's no inherent exponential growth curve that's part of the cycle of nature as well.
And I'm not even saying it's wrong. I'm just pointing out like the difference.
The difference.
Well, I'm really
and
happy
it's
to
important.
hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's important to talk about that difference because, as you said, we're going into a future human. This emergence of AI could serve as sort of those anomalies that allow us to decline faster in order to get to where humanity is meant to be at. Where do you see that playing out, especially in these few years where AI is really taking off and taking hold of a lot of our processes in our systems in society?
I think it's the biggest distraction that nature could conceive of, right? And I know that many people see it as a savior potentially, and I'm always very I'm a bit of a rebel actually in my heart, and so I'm always very careful about projecting savior onto anything outside myself, and that includes technology. And it's an old pattern and a habit that humans have. We project savior onto someone else, whether it's the president or the prime minister or and now it's just technology. Technology is going to save us. Yeah, it's going to do this. It's going to allow us to do that. And I see its richness, and I see it, and I love it. It's like movies, it's like, I love movies. I love watching those. It's like so rich and stuff, but it also can be a huge distraction from what's in front, what actually we need to tackle. And so I think it has two prongs to it, doesn't it? It has it can deliver amazing results and wisdom. Well, maybe not wisdom, but it can, because wisdom is something particular to, living beings. But it can create breakthroughs for us for sure. But I also think it's going to distract us hugely. And while it's distracting us, change will speed up. That's my feeling anyway. Sometimes that's how change works. So nature is she's a rascal.
Yeah. And I think the reason why humanity is where it is because we've also done such a great job at passing our wisdom down through generations. And part of the reason I do this is so that wisdom is preserved and still passed through, sort of like a time capsule and legacy. And recently I was talking to a friend who was just at a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat, and she heard that he announced this training program that he was doing for the youth, and he decided to name it Excalibur, which is the sword of Merlin that he passed down to King Arthur. And since you're so embedded into the mythology, I'm really curious to know what that sparks within you of the meaning of the sword and the generations, and what is that all? I've been trying to contemplate on it as well, but I'd love to hear your
I think
maybe thoughts on it.
that myth I obviously loved as a boy because I grew up with it, and I live actually in the lands where the legends were born. So I live near Cornwall and Devon, where I live. Cornwall is where Merlin's cave was, and then Wales we mentioned, land of the bards, and Arthur's court, Camelot, and all that. That's that's said to be down in the West Country where I live, and there's lots of different places where it could have been. And it's more about like the land that births the stories, kind of has the magic of the stories, and than actually the place. But the places are also amazing, and they have rich kind of energies that you come out of the earth. And but yeah, the sword is, I use that sometimes when I talk about the gene keys, and I talk about the drawing of the sword from the stone, and only you can draw the sword from the stone. And in a way, the stone represents like our DNA, right? It's the form principle, and then hidden in that DNA, because DNA is like a serpent or it's like a spiral, is this incredible Kundalini energy, this kind of like dragon, the dragon that's hidden in the crystal, that's also in those mythologies, and you draw the sword from the stone, and it's like you're pulling out the shadow from the shadow. You're pulling the gift and the Siddhi out from the stone, and then you're holding it above your head, and it becomes an extension of you, and it then represents your power. And the sword is not, it can be used two-pointed. It can be used to hack and destroy, or it can be used to heal as well. And so Excalibur is the sword that kind of can heal. It's the sword of love, of truth, of wisdom, and that's what it represents. And that's why it's, even when Arthur throws it back into the lake, and because he doesn't want the responsibility of being the avatar, of being the savior, because we all have to go through that process inside ourselves. You have to one day become your own teacher, right? So which means you have to like go through this doubt of like, I can't do this, and so you throw the sword, but then the sword returns through the lady in the lake, who's this deep feminine wisdom of the earth, who gives the sword back to you, because it's a test, right? You actually have to throw away. When you're offered the power, you have to kind of go, no, I don't want that. And then she gives it back to you, but she kind of gives it, when it's given back, it has even more power because it's been given from the feminine, and which is the deepest part of our being, the watery parts of our being. And so we've passed our test, and then we can, wield it, not with anger and vengeance, but with love, and we're not even then wielding it. It then just becomes us. The sword becomes an extension of your magical abilities and capacities. And I have deep, that myth runs very deep through my life, and it has so many layers. Like, I love that about mythic strands, the layers it has. And I'm kind of exploring those at the moment in my Codon Rings, these rings that are deep contemplations of collections of the gene keys. And some of those myths are kind of emerging through the mists of my contemplations of those, I call them the rings. And they form kind of conglomerates of mythologies from a different work, from all across humanity. So in a way, it's like I don't think I could have done this until now in my life, right? Because I was waiting many years, people going, can you tell us about the Codon Rings, mysterious collections of the codes of the gene keys? And I kept saying for years, no, I'm not ready to do those. And now I'm ready, and I've started them. That is because you need to understand lots of different strands of different myths, and you need to have lived them as well, so that you can kind of share your insight, your wisdom from within those stories. So you have to have kind of gone through some suffering and some failures and some, and then you understand, you're like, oh, I understand that myth. Yes, in my life, I know, I can recognize that sword. I know that moment when I was given that sword and I thought I was great. And then I was like, oh no, look what I've done with it.
And who was the feminine that gave it back?
Yeah.
In your story, what was that feminine that gave the sword back to you?
Oh, well, for me, it's all, you could say many things. I mean, for me, like the feminine represents things like forgiveness and self-forgiveness, or forgiveness of, just a deep well of love that comes at you from either within you or from outside you, that kind of puts you through a transformational process yourself. So that it can show up in many different ways in our lives when the sword is given back to us. I think that the mythology is there underneath, but for each of us, it's unique to our life's journey. It always comes after we failed at something, and then we realize, oh, we didn't fail. It was just part of our story. It wasn't a failure. It had to be that way. And afterwards you realize why. And then you come to some form of peace with it. And that's the feminine giving it back to you. You're like, I'm so glad I went through that, even though it was painful. And you come to unification. And I've just done in the Codon Rings the ring of union, which is about the cosmic lovers. Each one of the Codon Rings relates to one of the 22 tarot symbols. So and those are the kind of letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which are a very sacred alphabet. So it's sort of the alphabet of our universe in a way, the alphabet of all the stories and the creation stories of our universe. And and the cosmic lovers is a beautiful part of the story, is about how we long for the perfect mate, the perfect partner, the soul partner, and it's that journey of like finding them, losing them, realizing again that it's inside you at the deepest level, and then finding it again, but at a higher iteration. And it's the sort of tantra of, learning to heal your heart and your trauma with another person on the journey. You have to have another person to witness you, and you have to witness their healing as well. And that's like deep, deep relationship work over many years that we have to undertake in a way to kind of pass through those initiations of the lovers. So I loved going into that story in that Codon Ring. If people are interested, you can get them on my website.
Yeah, and I think also the reason why I brought up the Merlin story was because of the myth and how it relates to all the myths that you are bringing through with the Codon Rings. And when I heard you talk about it, you called them the FAQs of the whole universe, where no question that can't be answered. There's no question that can't be answered by this teaching.
Yeah.
I'd love to go even deeper into why you feel that way, in the sense that because of these 22 codon rings that represent the amino acids, why are all the answers to the universe within this packet or transmission that you're able to tune into?
Well, I think first of all, I think anyone can tune into it because it's in our body. That's the whole notion of DNA. So the FAQs of the universe are inside us. But this is a nice kind of part of the story of the Gene Keys teachings, because it's the way it's packaged in these 22 components that, and the way those are kind of, they form what are called fields. So there's 5 fields that are formed, and there's a really lovely imagery you can see. If people are interested, you can go to Codon Rings on the Gene Keys website and watch the video, and it's a free video, and then in there are like, you can see these 5 fields, and you can see the Codon Rings, and they show us how amino acid structures deep in our body relate to constellations in the stars, in the heavens. Like, so it's like, it's
the dragon,
really, sorry,
the chalice.
Yes,
I saw the dragon was made into one of these.
The dragon, the chalice, these are the fields, and in the middle is the face. It's called the face. It's the face of God, and it's the divine. It's the one that's formed out of all the others. So once you've kind of traveled all the journeys of your incarnations and all your lives, what you realize that you've kind of created this magical journey through the form, and it's been unique to your soul. It's your soul's signature in light, written in the stars, and it's this kind of unique tracery of your canvas that you've woven over, out of timelessness in this trajectory, in this universe. And once you've got to start to see that kind of the shape you formed, in the middle of it, you'll realize that you have actually traced the face of God. And then you're like, oh my God, it was me all along. And that's the deep revelation of truth. Like, you realize, I am that. I am that. That's in light. That's the self-realized state. So there's a kind of, I'm threading the story of, that's mythic, but it's also, it's the Buddha's story. It's Zarathustra's story. It's Krishna's story. It's all the great avatars who've come to this earth have held this story. And the great, Kuan Yin, and, the great divine feminine, flowerings, and all the lineages have held this same story, and they've told it in different ways. So I'm telling the same story in a unique Gene Keysy way. But yeah, they're and I'm doing a thing in London. You guys might like this. Anyone listening to this, it's 24th of September, and it's I'm doing an evening in London called Celestial Chemistry, and it's in St James's Church, which is a magical church. So if you're ever in the UK, come for that evening if you can. And this is also on my website. And otherwise, you can dial in online at stream. It's not. It's only. I'm only there for an hour and a half or two. But it's like what I'm going to do, Emilio, is I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to be a guinea pig, and I'm going to ask the audience, and that includes online. Anyone that's online, bring me a question. Like, let's ask the field these questions, and then we'll dive into one of the codon rings. I'll just look at the map and I will intuit one. And I haven't even all contemplated them all yet in depth. I've only done about 5. But we'll go in through one of those doorways, and then we'll start to find the story inside, and we'll see if that question can be answered. And that question can be deeply personal to you, or it can be completely cosmic and, what is free will? One of those. Or it can be like, how do I heal this issue with my partner where he is doing this thing? And it can be really personal, or it can be subjective, or it can be very impersonal. And so I'm gonna explore the codon rings for like an hour or so, or an hour and a half, with whatever questions people bring, without a plan, and so it's a bit of a fun storytelling evening that hopefully will have a practical kind of flavor of showing how the art of contemplation can be used with one of these kind of coding signatures that anything. You can contemplate anything in depth, and those answers will come forth. So yeah.
A question that comes up there is, if these stories are so universal, and so in a way, I guess universal is the only word that's coming through right now for me, but why would we need so many billions and trillions of fractals of individuated consciousness or souls to live through these stories over and over again? Does the story at any point ever evolve, change? The playwriter, is he shifting how that story is written and ends or begins? I don't know why that question's coming up, but
I think you were saying that you I don't know if you've listened to the Ring of Origin yet. This is the first one.
Yeah.
But that's the one that kind of tells the first story, the story of the stories. And the Ring of Origin is the Fool. It's the divine Fool, and it's where the story always begins and ends. And so the story begins with innocence. And every incarnation begins with innocence, right? We begin as a baby, we don't know anything, and then we start our journey, and we start to go on this karmic journey of our life, and then our soul's signature appears, behind the scenes, and it starts to kind of inform the journey. So there's our kind of ego on its journey, but then there's our soul underneath with its kind of coding. And the more awakened we become in our story, the more of the soul we feel and can incarnate, until one life we almost arrive fully awake, or we do, and that's what perhaps these future vehicles will allow us to arrive fully awake. And so the story itself starts to dissolve, because it starts to complete itself. And endings start appearing everywhere, and you're like that, because the story is like, wow, things are really resolving themselves in this life, and we're going to see that in this final phase of humanity. It's like all the ancient mythic strands and threads will start resolving themselves, just like a great Ibsen play or a Shakespeare play, whereas towards the end, everything,
the grand finale.
Yeah, everything in the finale, any good finale, right? That's how it ends. Things get resolved. Otherwise, you're left kind of if it doesn't get resolved, you're deeply dissatisfied, and you're like, well, I don't want to watch that again. I need one that resolves itself. And so life has to resolve itself. The story has to kind of get back to unity. And so it starts from innocence and it gets to wisdom. But the fool at the end is the same as the fool at the beginning, but richer for the journey. And the old person and the young person, that's why they have such a kind of affinity, grandparent and the grandchild, because it's like the young fool and the old fool are kind of meeting each other and seeing each other's, understanding, empathizing very deeply with the journey that you've just taken or you're about to take. And so the eyes of a grandchild and a grandparent looking at each other are very special. There's a very special transmission that takes place, a recognition. But yeah, the stories they're iterative, endless. They're always changing. There's never a repetition. That is, as you said, they're fractal and they're alive and they're infinite. There's infinite stories, and a universe without stories, it's like a dead universe. So there's this story of this universe, but then we live in a multiverse, so even when this universe has finished, and we're just talking about one planet, like when this planet has finished, when we're done with this planet, our story, the human story, will start another journey, into higher evolutions. We might call that an angelic evolution, the beginning of an angelic evolution. And I've heard from some of the great teachers who said, there's our universe, but the angelic universe is massive, right? So you think ours is big. The angelic universe is infinitely larger than ours. We're like a tiny little speck. And so we have a whole other reality to then move through. We start at the bottom of that one. And and then on Earth, on Gaia, another creature comes up through another round begins. There's usually a fallow period where the Earth is left. When humans have ascended, the Earth will be left for a period. Just like a farmer leaves the field after it's finished its harvest. It's like, I'm going to leave that field for a couple of years now. I'm just going to let it rest. And the Earth is so glad to rest. And then the biome starts to work again, and the energy starts to build, and then new plants form, and so stories follow structures that are very universal and are kind of imprinted at every single level of creation. That's why ultimately for me, I'm a storyteller, and from that bardic tradition, and if you understand one story well, you understand all stories. So yeah, it never ends. So when this universe is folded up and packed away, life will continue, in a broader way. It's hard for us to conceive infinity.
I remember being like a really small child, and I would go to sleep at night, and I would try to wrap my head around, I don't know why I came with the knowing that we go on and like the soul just goes on. I just knew it from a very early age, but I was trying to fathom what does infinity actually mean? Like, I'm going to be around for infinity. And then my human brain was like, but there's time, and then there's years, and then there's cycles. And I just could not, like, I think if I try to, I will break my brain in half, because it's an unfathomable truth.
I think, if anyone's ever experienced, I mean, this is a bit out there for some people maybe, but if some people might have had this, a moment of pure awe or pure bliss, if you've ever experienced that, you suddenly, you experience timelessness. And if you've ever had an experience of timelessness, you suddenly get infinity. You're like, because it's not something that the time processing brain can kind of grasp. But if you've experienced that bliss field, which is our natural state, then you don't have a problem with infinity. In fact, you realize that infinity is our home. It is our home. That is what home feels like. There's nothing that feels more homely than infinity. Yeah.
Right now, you're currently at the tail end of a 9-month program that you started in January. And just like you said, you were going to run experiments in London. There was an experiment that you ran in this program that you asked the question, how does a collective blossom? Now that you're almost at that tail end of that program, 9 months, what did you find out regarding that question?
Well, I'm still in the story personally. I'm still in the tail of it. So yes, the tail is a funny joke. And so I don't know enough yet. And we're going to have to ask people as we come to the end and hear a whole series of stories. And then I think we'll have an idea of how a collective awakens. And also because there's this mapping process, you're talking about the Star Pearl, this teaching, there's a mapping process where we are mapping our lives. We're kind of, there's this self-analysis tool that you kind of grade the different aspects of your life over a period of time. So by the time we come to the third of those self-assessments, we're going to have some graphs that we can run on the whole of the, I think 3,000, maybe more, 4,000 people. And that's a good pool to see, well, what's happened to 4,000 people over 9 months. And we'll be able to see it through the graph because every single person has filled in those forms and given themselves grades in different areas of their lives. And so we'll be able to see that, which is quite revealing because there's some stats in that. But the other side of it is stories. Like until we hear the stories of what happened to people in those 9 months, we don't have the other half of the brain. So we're going to need to gather, listen to, and integrate those stories and then our own story. I mean, I've had quite a 9 months, I can tell you.
It's been a rough year.
Not rough, but well, just unexpected. And yeah, I don't know. I feel I'm a more loving being than when I began the year. I don't know.
Someone once asked you, how do you know all the information that you have and that you hold? And you described it as there was this beingness that you came across that gave you an atom of itself. And I'm wondering how you would describe what that atom has done in your life. You know, you're saying that you're experiencing more lovingness, more beingness. Has that atom expanded in you? Has it been more embodied in you? And I imagine you're also sharing that atom with whoever you come across as well.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like I'd forgotten I said that. It's a nice contemplation. And yeah, it's sort of, you know, it's like life shares itself through me as it does through everyone else. I mean, I actually, after these 9 months from this journey, I actually feel less special than ever. I think love does that. I don't know. I think love is like somewhere that atom is like, because it contains the mystery of infinity. And when we're, like you just said, when we're confronted with that beingness, the only kind of proper response, like the fool, is sort of laughter and love. And that's all that we are in our core. I mean, that's what I've come to. I mean, that's why I think I'm, you know, I probably have a bit more writing left in me, but I think I'm sort of coming to the end of my words. because that atom is just an atom of being. And at some point, I just like to be with people.
Just telepathy, no words.
Well, I don't. I think words are lovely. I love, like, I serve tea, like little teas, sometimes. I'd love to do that with you one day. And when we do tea, like a tea ceremony, we, whoever I'm with, we might do a couple of pours of the tea in silence, maybe. But the rest of the time, we just allow the chit chat to do its thing. And sometimes it's not chit chat, sometimes it's deep dialogue. And then sometimes it turns into laughter. Sometimes someone cries. Sometimes, it's like, it's just being together. It's satsang, being with the master. The master is life, the atom is the atom of the master. It's like, and we all have that atom in a way inside us. So yeah, just being in presence is becoming more important to me. And I feel that, like I think I was telling you earlier, like I can feel a lot of things I'm completing in my life, completing this great big book. I'm doing the Golden Path program next year for the last time. I'm going to teach it, and I'm doing lots of things for the last time, and I'm ending things and I'm closing things as we get towards 2027. And it's almost like I'm going to be done around that time. And then I don't know what I'm going to do after that. I think I'm just going to be. I know I've always sort of wanted, after I finished teaching, I always wanted to just disappear into my life. And I always feel like it's easy to overstay your welcome, if you go to a party, it's like, you've got to know when to leave. You've got to know when to stop. It's like you got to know when you're done. And I'm feeling more of that, especially with everything that's coming out into the atmosphere at the moment, with all there's so many teachers and teachings and things. It's like, I don't, I don't think I'm needed.
The beauty is that you're never leaving, because
I'm not.
You leave behind a legacy and a living transmission that lives through you. And then you also mentioned that what we leave behind are our stories, our dreams, and our children. So really, we don't ever really end. Our existence is just pass through time for the collective to drink from that well of the transmission that you left.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, leave some good teas behind.
Speaking of tea, I was co-hosting. I had the gift of co-hosting with Regina Meredith on Gaia on her show Open Minds, and she told me that she always drinks her pu'er tea, which she got from you and your ceremonies. So I definitely would love to experience one of those ceremonies with you, and
I would love that.
Become a tea guy.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a lovely thing to do. I mean, you can also do it with wine, but then that's alcohol, so it has a different thing. Tea is just very equalizing. It doesn't give you the high. It does give you a high, but it's a different kind of high. It's not a toxin. But yeah, I'd love to do that. Let's get together.
Let's do it. Beautiful. Richard, we end every show with a segment called The Final Trio, as you know. And before we go into that, I'd love to ask you, for those of you that are new here, where would you send them to connect with you, with all of your beautiful transmissions, your work, the Codon Rings, the London event that is coming right up soon? Where would you send people for that?
You go to genekeys.com, my website, and a nice place to begin is to get your profile, your Gene Keys profile. And that's fun to look at that and then begin an exploration of that. And another nice place to begin in these teachings is a little book I wrote called The Art of Contemplation, which you know about, and which is on Amazon. And that's a really short, sweet, simple teaching. And if you're a deep diver and you like jumping straight in the deep end, then you could either buy my Gene Keys book, which is a big, thick, kind of crazy, it's where it all began.
I lift weights when I can't go to the gym. I'm just with my Gene Key.
Well, when the stage comes out, we're going to have balance. We can be like this. We do often really beautiful retreats, online retreats, and ways, where we go through the teachings together. And the next one's not till January, but if you sign up to our Pulse, that's actually probably the most important thing, is like when you click your profile, it says, would you like to receive our Pulse, which is our kind of love letter out to each of our people, our community. And that's full of inspiring things. And it also gives you the free Gene Key audio of every week, the Gene Key that's moving through at the moment. And so there are lots of resources in that, and it's a good way of staying in touch. So it's one of the things you normally don't click when you go in somewhere. It says, would you like to receive this newsletter? And you never click that, right? This one you should. It's not a newsletter. It's a love letter. And so I would recommend you click that, and then you can always unsubscribe if you don't like it. But I think you'll enjoy it. It's a lovely way to see what's happening in the Gene Keys field and to connect into our community, and what's the latest events, and what's the, what am I up to? And I'm always putting out free little fragments of light and transmissions on that. It's how I kind of communicate with my community. So that's a great way, the Pulse. Oh, and Gaia TV, if you're into that, about to start a whole series on there. 10 episodes of introduction to the Gene Keys. If you might see some of that. You might see it on the airwaves.
The airwaves.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I'll include all of the links in the show notes. I'm subscribed to the Pulse, and it's also sort of an oracle, because every so days there you guys send a random Gene Key, and sometimes it's like exactly the Gene Key that I needed to hear that day. Yeah. So I love it, and really recommend people to get on there.
And we might be talking about doing something next year, Emilio. So we'll talk more about that.
Definitely. For the final trio, these 3 questions are personalized to every guest. The first one I had for you is, if Homo Sanctus, the sacred future human, could speak through this transmission, what message would it give to the current state of humanity?
Yeah. Did you ask me this before?
No.
I don't want to repeat myself.
This is a new one. This is a new one.
That's a great question. It would say the same thing as I did this free series called The Ecstatics. I don't know if you ever came across that, where I take a person who I admire because of the stream of their love that they brought to the earth, and then I went on a 3-month-long or sometimes 6-month-long contemplation and exploration of the life they led, and then I condensed that into like 1 hour or less of, this is who I think this person was, this is their transmission, and then it's set to music. Anyway, the first one I ever did was Mother Julian, a Christian mystic. And this is free online, so you can go. It's not actually that easy to find.
I'm like, why haven't I heard of this?
Yeah, I know, it's kind of wild. They're beautiful as well. They're really good transmissions. The Ecstatics, Richard Rudd. You'll get it on Google.
There it is.
And it'll come up on our website, and it's on YouTube as well. But Mother Julian is the first of those mystics, and she had this very famous statement that she said is that all will be well, and all will be well, and all manner of things will be well. And that's what she heard from Christ in her revelation, in her epiphany. And she didn't just hear it, she kind of saw it, felt it, realized, as I did in my epiphany, like I realized, oh wow, we're all going to be amazing. So human, Homo Sanctus would just come back to us and would just say, guys, I promise you this is going to turn out better than your wildest dreams. But for a little bit, it's going to be a little bit hairy. Okay? So just know that the end is going to be amazing. And in the meantime, cling on.
Wow.
Something like that.
I'm also seeing that you did Hafiz, the Persian poet.
Yeah, there's one by Hafiz, there's one by Walt Whitman, Taliesin, the Celtic bard, Rainer Maria Rilke, great Austrian poet. Can't remember the other ones. Oh, Ananda Maima, Indian saint. That was a lovely one. Yeah, and
if you were to do a next one on someone else, who would you choose?
Yeah, I thought I might do another series actually, because I did 7 of those, and I thought I might do a series called The Initiates, that would be more the kind of the not mental, but the sort of the wisdom stream as opposed to the love stream, because those are all love stream people, and wisdom is something I'd like to look into. So I thought I'd do like Rudolf Steiner. Yeah, I've got a few other ideas. Walter Russell, I'd like to do. Like, there are different energy. There's different stream. Alice Bailey, would be really amazing.
One day I'll be doing one on you.
I knew him.
Richard, the second question I have for you is, if you were to gift us one living question to hold in our hearts for the rest of this year, a question that would rewire us from the inside out, what would it be?
I think it's the Grail question, for me, which appears in my Pearl teachings, which you probably know the answer. But it's a great question for one's soul, which is, how can I be of the greatest service to the whole? That's a question to live yourself into. And I think it's a question that leads to enormous grace coming your way in life. How can I be of the greatest service to the whole? Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I have this G key. I'm forgetting the number, but it's selfishness, selflessness, and the C, I believe, is altruism.
The gift is altruism, and then the Siddhi is selflessness. Because there's a kind of double entendre in that word.
Huh. Yeah. I've seen how that has worked, and from my early years to my early 20s, I was very selfish, and then there was a shift, and because I found something of purpose, I found something that I get to create with, and just seeing you as well as an inspiration, because you create just like naturally. It's like a flow of information. It has brought me into deeper states of altruism and wanting to share that with people. And so thank you.
Well, you do it really well, Emilio. You are just a deeply loving, giving man.
Appreciate you. If all teachings that you've ever created would vanish tomorrow, what single piece of remembrance would you pass on?
Well, I think it would be like something to do with like it was something to do with what I was talking about with the fool, with laughter, like try and see the joke behind existence. Like there's a joke there, there's a punchline, and it requires that you yourself are a bit of a trickster, and you can embrace mischief, and that that in my Dream Arc course, there's another big course I did, that the tricksters are like, we talk about the creatures, all the animals, all the gene keys are transformed into animals, right? So it's a very rich, crazy course, and totally right brain and imagination. But there are certain animals that are just, and birds and underworld creatures that are tricksters, natural tricksters. Like a magpie is a great trickster. They steal stuff. And in traditions, there are tricksters. The rabbit is sometimes seen as the trickster, or the hare.
The hyena.
The hyena, yeah. And different ones. Anyway, so in our lives, in our everyday lives, there are tricksters, that are out there. And there are trickster energies that come into our life. And sometimes the trickster energies move through other people and they trick us, or they steal from us, or they vampire from us, or they latch onto us and won't let go, or they push our buttons. But it's the trickster energy trying to awaken you to a deeper level. So what I would say in a roundabout way is something to do with embracing that is really beautiful. You know, if you can embrace the trickster in creation, you won't be nearly as annoyed by things in your life or people, and you won't be so frustrated by, you know, the politicians and the people and the way things are going, because you'll realize that the world is full of trickster energies, and that there's a delight in that as well. There's a truth operating underneath it. And you yourself are a bit of a trickster. So don't take things so seriously, and try and get the joke. I think that's a lovely thing to remember. I mean, I think the comedians are the most sacred people, like the holy fool. The fool is traditionally the sacred one, you know, and comedians in the world are really worth listening to.
I was in New York. I was visiting my partner, and I went to 3 Comedy Cellar shows, like back to back to back, because I realized how much there's so much tension in the US. So like everyone is so sensitive to all these topics, and then a comedian goes in and starts making jokes about them, and everyone's laughing, and it's like, wow, he just alchemized something very interesting there.
True.
So I was fascinated with.
They're the only people who are allowed to speak about it. If you notice that,
right?
Like they can get away with it mostly
without getting canceled.
Yeah. So they are kind of special. That's the trickster energy. It's like it doesn't get, you know, I mean, it can get caught, but it's like it can move through the matrix seamlessly. And I think that's us in our subtle bodies. You know, if you want to move through a situation seamlessly, you need a bit of that trickster energy to help you navigate. So, yeah, nice thing to remember.
For sure. And Richard, I've had to compose myself through this whole interview because I've been on the verge of tears with the way that you express, the way that you weave words together, and it's all coming from your heart. It's such an honor to be able to create with you. I can't even explain it. I think my grandchildren will be proud of me one day for being in these conversations with you. But thank you so much. And this has been one of the richest we've had yet. And I think they're just going to continue to morph and go deeper because there's so many layers to this transmission. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Emilio. You're so kind. And I can see why your podcast has continued to grow, and your audience as well, because you carry such a sweet, energetic, transmission of love, and it's so tangible that, and you have a little dose of the trickster as well, which I think is great.
Sometimes it comes out here and there.
Yeah. Oh,
thank you
blessings
so much.
To you. Thank you, and thank you everyone for listening.